In the annals of military history, few inventions have captured the imagination quite like the flamethrower. While modern iterations conjure images of World War II and beyond, the true origins of this fearsome weapon stretch back over a millennium to the heart of the Byzantine Empire and their closely guarded secret, Greek fire. As the Roman poet Virgil once wrote, "The descent to hell is easy," and indeed, the development of such a weapon marked a new chapter in the infernal nature of warfare. The year was 672 CE. The vast walls of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, stood resolute against the relentless tide of Arab expansion. The Umayyad Caliphate, under the leadership of Muawiyah I, emboldened by recent conquests including Egypt and parts of North Africa, sought to strike at the very heart of Eastern Christianity. As Arab ships approached the Golden Horn, the narrow inlet northwest of the Bosphorus Strait, the defenders of Constantinople, led by Emperor Constantine IV, unleashed a weapon that would become the stuff of legend. From the decks of Byzantine dromons, swift warships that were the backbone of the Byzantine navy, a viscous, flammable liquid erupted in great gouts of flame, engulfing enemy vessels in an inferno that water itself could not quench. This was Greek fire, the precursor to modern flamethrowers, and it would change the face of warfare for centuries to come. The Byzantine historian Theophanes the Confessor later wrote of this moment, "The fire-bearing ships went forth against the enemy, and by God's help burned them." The invention of Greek fire is traditionally attributed to a Syrian engineer named Callinicus of Heliopolis, who fled to Constantinople in the face of Arab expansion around 668 CE. Callinicus, also known as Callinicos, is said to have presented his invention to Emperor Constantine IV, who immediately recognized its potential. However, some historians, like J.R. Partington in his work A History of Greek Fire and Gunpowder, argue that the weapon may have been developed gradually by Byzantine chemists and engineers over time, rather than being the work of a single inventor. The exact composition of Greek fire remains a mystery to this day, a testament to the Byzantines' ability to keep secrets. Contemporary accounts describe it as a mixture that included petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and possibly saltpeter. Some speculate that pine resin might have been added to help it adhere to surfaces. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus, 905–959, wrote in his work De Administrando Imperio that the secret of Greek fire was divinely revealed to the first Constantine, and that angels had instructed that it should never be disclosed to other nations. He stated, "If any person should dare to procure the secret of the fire from others, or disclose it to anyone, he should be anathematized and excommunicated as the enemy of the state." The delivery system for Greek fire was as innovative as the substance itself. It was projected through bronze tubes called siphons, mounted on the prows of ships or on the walls of fortifications. These siphons, operated by a mechanism involving pumps and compressed air, could project the flaming liquid up to 15 meters. The 6th century military treatise, Strategicon, attributed to Emperor Maurice, describes a primitive form of this device, suggesting that the technology evolved over time. The Byzantine historian Theophanes described the effect. "As it falls like thunder from heaven, it rushes upon the enemy." The psychological impact of Greek fire cannot be overstated. Anna Komnena, daughter of Emperor Alexios the Komnenos, wrote in her historical work, The Alexiad, about its terrifying effect. "This fire they hurled at us by means of tubes, and it came on with a roaring sound and a flame of prodigious size, setting fire to the faggots." The Arab historian Al-Masudi, writing in the 10th century, described it as a fiery furnace that inspired terror in all who witnessed it. Greek fire proved decisive in numerous conflicts. During the first Arab siege of Constantinople, 674–678, it was instrumental in repelling the Umayyad fleet. The Arab commander Yazid, son of Muawiyah I, was forced to withdraw after his ships were decimated by the Byzantine secret weapon. In 717, During another Arab siege led by Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik, Greek fire once again saved the city, destroying much of the Arab navy. The Byzantine chronicler Theophanes the Confessor wrote, "On the 18th of August, in the third indition, the Arabs brought up their fire ships and birems as far as the bows. At night, the emperor ordered the siphon-bearing ships to sail out against them. With God's help and the intercession of the all-pure Mother of God, the enemy's ships were sunk, some by our siphon-bearing ships, and others were burnt by our ravagers." The weapon's effectiveness extended beyond naval warfare. In 941, during a Rus' attack on Constantinople led by Prince Igor of Kiev, Greek fire was used to devastating effect. The primary chronicle recounts, "The Greeks came out from the city in ships and began to attack the Rus with Greek fire, and they burned them so that the Rus could not see, and they fled in terror." This defeat left such an impression on the Rus that it was immortalized in their epic literature, including the Tale of Igor's Campaign. The versatility of Greek fire was demonstrated in its use on land as well. During the Byzantine-Bulgarian wars of the late 10th and early 11th centuries, Emperor Nikephoros II Phocas employed portable flamethrowers against Bulgarian fortifications. The Byzantine military manual known as the Tactica of Leo VI describes these devices as handheld siphons that could be carried by a single soldier. The secret of Greek fire was so closely guarded that it eventually became lost to history. By the time of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, which saw the sack of Constantinople by Western Crusaders, led by Boniface of Montferrat and Enrico Dandolo, the weapon seems to have fallen out of use. The loss of this technology marked the end of an era in Byzantine military supremacy. The Venetian chronicler Martin de Canal, writing in the 13th century, lamented, "The Greeks have lost the knowledge of that fire, but while they possessed it, they were formidable to all nations." Inferno unleashed, the fiery genesis of modern flamethrowers in the Great War. In the smoke-filled trenches of World War I, where the staccato of machine gun fire and the thunder of artillery had become the grim soundtrack of modern warfare, a new and terrifying weapon emerged. The year was 1915, and the German army was about to unleash a device that would bring the very flames of hell to the battlefield, the modern flamethrower. This weapon would come to embody the industrialized brutality of the conflict, prompting British war poet Wilfred Owen to later write in his haunting verse, "Dulci et decorum est." "If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin." The genesis of this fearsome weapon can be traced back to the ingenious mind of Richard Fiedler, a German engineer who had been experimenting with incendiary devices since the turn of the century. Fiedler's creation, the Flammenwerfer, literally flamethrower in German, was a far cry from the crude fire-projecting devices of ancient times. It was a sophisticated piece of engineering capable of spewing burning oil in a concentrated stream up to 20 meters away. Fiedler's initial prototype, demonstrated to the German army in 1901, was met with skepticism. It wasn't until 1908 that the German army began to show serious interest, funding further development and refinement of the weapon. The German High Command, ever eager for an edge in the bloody stalemate of trench warfare, saw the potential in Fiedler's invention. On February 26, 1915, they authorized the formation of a specialized unit, the Flammenwerfer Abteilung, flamethrower detachment, under the command of Major Redemann. This unit, initially comprising just 348 men, would soon write a new chapter in the annals of warfare. The detachment was divided into 3 companies, each equipped with 12 large flamethrowers and 24 small ones. The soldiers of this unit underwent rigorous training at a secret facility near Berlin, learning not only how to operate the complex devices, but also how to maintain them under combat conditions. The flamethrower made its combat debut on June 25, 1915, in the Argonne sector of the Western Front. The target was a French position near Malancourt, held by elements of the 42nd Division. As dawn broke, German pioneers crept forward with their cumbersome but lethal devices. At the signal, great gouts of flame erupted from the German lines, engulfing the French trenches in a sea of fire. The effect was devastating, both physically and psychologically. French soldier Henri Barbusse, who witnessed the attack, later wrote in his memoir, Under Fire, "It was as if the gates of hell had opened before us. Men ran screaming, their uniforms aflame, their faces twisted in agony." The attack was a resounding success, with the Germans capturing the French position and taking over 1,000 prisoners. The success of this initial deployment led to a rapid expansion of the Flammenwerfer Abteilung. By the end of 1915, 3 companies had been formed, each equipped with 48 large flamethrowers and 96 smaller, portable ones. These units would see action in some of the war's most notorious battles, including the meat grinder of Verdun. The flamethrower troops quickly gained a fearsome reputation, with Allied soldiers nicknaming them the Devils of Malancourt after their first successful engagement. At Verdun, on February 21, 1916, the flamethrower once again proved its worth as a shock weapon. As part of the initial German assault, flamethrower teams advanced alongside stormtroopers to clear French bunkers and strongpoints. The psychological impact was immense. French Lieutenant Alfred Joubert wrote in his diary on February 23rd, "Hell cannot be so terrible. Men are mad with horror and suffering." The flamethrowers helped the Germans make significant gains in the early days of the battle, though they would ultimately fail to break the French defense. During the first week of the battle alone, German flamethrower units conducted over 80 attacks, clearing numerous French positions and contributing to the capture of Fort Douaumont on February 25th. The use of flamethrowers wasn't limited to offensive operations. They proved equally effective in defense, particularly against Allied tank attacks. On April 24, 1918, during the Second Battle of Villers-Bretonneux, German flamethrower teams successfully repelled several British tanks of the 1st Tank Brigade. The intense heat and smoke generated by the flamethrowers forced tank crews to abandon their vehicles, making them easy targets for German infantry. Lieutenant Colonel Edgar Swinton, one of the pioneers of tank warfare, later wrote in his memoirs, "The appearance of flamethrowers on the battlefield presented a new and terrifying challenge to our armored forces. It was a stark reminder that technological advance is a double-edged sword in warfare." As news of the flamethrowers' effectiveness spread, the Allies scrambled to develop their own versions. The British were the first to respond, with Lieutenant William Livens leading the development effort. Livens, an engineer by training, created a large static flamethrower that could project flame over 100 yards. These Livens large gallery flame projectors were first used on July 1, 1916, during the opening day of the Battle of the Somme. 4 were deployed near the village of Mametz, where they helped clear German trenches and contributed to one of the few Allied successes that day. The massive devices, weighing over 2.5 tons each, had to be transported in sections and assembled in underground chambers. Despite their impressive range, their static nature limited their tactical flexibility. The French, too, developed their own flamethrowers, known as Schild Flammenwerfers, named after their inventor, Captain Schild. These were first used in April 1916 during the later stages of the Battle of Verdun. While not as advanced as their German counterparts, they still proved effective in clearing trenches and bunkers. French General Robert Nivelle, impressed by their performance, ordered the formation of dedicated flamethrower units within the French army. By the end of 1916, the French had deployed over 300 flamethrowers across the Western Front. The Americans, late entrants to the war, initially relied on French-designed flamethrowers. However, by 1918, they had developed their own model, the M1A1 flamethrower. This saw limited use in the closing months of the war, particularly during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, noted in his post-war report, "The flamethrower, while a weapon of limited application, proved invaluable in certain tactical situations, particularly in the reduction of machine gun nests and fortified positions. Despite their effectiveness, flamethrowers were not without drawbacks. The equipment was heavy and cumbersome, making operators easy targets for enemy snipers. A fully loaded German flamethrower could weigh up to 79 pounds, severely limiting the mobility of its operator. The pressurized tanks were also vulnerable to rupture from small arms fire, often with catastrophic results for the operator. German Corporal Ernst Junger, in his war memoir Storm of Steel, described the grim fate of flamethrower operators. They fell like blazing torches, victims of their own weapon. In one particularly harrowing incident during the Battle of Passchendaele in 1917, an entire German flamethrower team was wiped out when a British sniper's bullet punctured a fuel tank, engulfing the men in a fireball visible from over a mile away. Moreover, the short range of early flamethrowers meant operators had to get dangerously close to enemy positions. This led to the development of larger vehicle-mounted flamethrowers later in the war. The Germans introduced the Grossflammenwerfer, capable of projecting flame up to 40 meters, while the British experimented with tank-mounted flamethrowers. The first British flame tank, a modified Mark IV, was tested in secret at Gwalunda in Yorkshire in early 1918, but never saw combat action. By the war's end, flamethrowers had become an established, if controversial, part of modern warfare. Their use was widespread. The Germans alone employed them in over 650 attacks throughout the war. The weapon had proven its worth in the grim calculus of trench warfare, able to clear enemy positions where artillery and gas had failed. In the final German offensive of 1918, Operation Michael flamethrower units played a crucial role in breaching the British lines, with over 100 flamethrower attacks recorded in the first 3 days of the offensive. The Canadian Lieutenant Frederick George Scott, a chaplain who served on the Western Front, wrote in his diary, "To see men burned alive, their flesh melting like wax, is a sight that sears the soul and makes one question the very foundations of civilization." As the guns fell silent in November 1918, the flamethrower had firmly established itself in the arsenal of modern armies. Its development during World War I marked a significant evolution in military technology, one that would have far-reaching consequences in future conflicts. Inferno unleashed, the fiery legacy of flamethrowers in World War II. The acrid smell of burning fuel filled the air as flames licked the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the battlefield. Soldiers cowered in their foxholes, their eyes wide with terror, as the unmistakable hiss of a flamethrower pierced the cacophony of war. This scene, repeated countless times throughout World War II, epitomized the horrifying effectiveness of one of the conflict's most feared weapons, the flamethrower. As war correspondent Ernie Pyle once wrote, "The flamethrower is a terrible weapon, and it can be a terrifying sight on the battlefield. It projects liquid fire for as much as 100 yards, and there is no way to escape it." As the war erupted in 1939, Germany was at the forefront of flamethrower technology. The Wehrmacht's primary model, the Flammenwerfer 35, could project a stream of burning fuel up to 25 meters, creating a hellish inferno that could flush out enemy troops from fortified positions. German soldiers nicknamed it the Zippo, after the popular American lighter, a dark joke that belied the weapon's lethal capabilities. The Flammenwerfer 35 weighed a staggering 35.8 kilograms, 79 pounds, when fully loaded, making it a cumbersome but devastating weapon in the hands of specially trained pionnier combat engineer units. One of the most notable early uses of flamethrowers in the war came during the German invasion of France in 1940. On May 27th, at the village of Le Paradis, SS troops of the 3rd SS Division, Totenkopf, used flamethrowers to devastate French defensive positions, paving the way for a massacre of British prisoners of war. This incident, while horrific, was just a taste of the carnage to come. The Le Paradis massacre, where 97 British soldiers were executed after surrendering, became one of the war's early atrocities and a stark reminder of the brutal nature of the conflict. As the war progressed, other nations quickly developed their own flamethrower designs. The Soviet Union deployed the Rockets II flamethrower, which saw extensive use during the brutal urban fighting of the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942. Red Army soldiers used these weapons to clear German-held buildings, turning the ruined city into a literal inferno. Soviet General Vasily Chikov later wrote, "The flamethrower was our most effective weapon in street fighting. It could make the difference between victory and defeat in a single building." The Rox II, weighing only 22 kilograms, 48.5 pounds, was more maneuverable than its German counterpart and could fire up to 10 bursts of flame. The United States, initially hesitant to employ flamethrowers due to concerns about their humanitarian implications, eventually embraced the weapon as the Pacific Campaign intensified. The United States introduced the M22 flamethrower in 1944, an improvement over the earlier M1 model. This weapon, weighing 68 pounds fully loaded, could project a stream of burning fuel up to 40 meters. Despite its effectiveness, it remained a dangerous weapon to wield. As one anonymous Marine on Peleliu grimly joked, "With this thing on your back, you're either the hunter or the hunted. There's no in-between." The Battle of Peleliu, which began on September 15, 1944, saw extensive use of flamethrowers against Japanese cave complexes. One Marine, Private Wilson D. Watson, earned the Medal of Honor for his actions on Iwo Jima, where he single-handedly attacked multiple enemy positions with his flamethrower. His citation reads, "Private Watson's aggressive initiative, valiant fighting spirit and unwavering devotion to duty were directly instrumental in the rapid elimination of Japanese opposition." Watson's heroic actions on February 26, 27, 1945 included destroying multiple pillboxes and taking out over 60 enemy soldiers, demonstrating the devastating potential of the flamethrower in skilled hands. The psychological impact of flamethrowers cannot be overstated. The weapon instilled a primal fear in enemy troops, often causing them to surrender or flee rather than face the prospect of being burned alive. This effect was not lost on military leaders. General George S. Patton famously quipped, "I don't want them to send me too many messages saying they are holding positions. We are not holding anything. Let the Hun do that. We are advancing constantly." Patton's aggressive tactics often incorporated flamethrowers, particularly in urban combat situations where they proved highly effective at clearing buildings and fortified positions. However, the use of flamethrowers was not without controversy. The weapon's gruesome effects and the suffering it inflicted led some to question its morality. Additionally, flamethrower operators were often targeted by enemy snipers, as their conspicuous equipment and the danger they posed made them priority targets. The life expectancy of a flamethrower operator in combat was often measured in minutes rather than hours. This grim reality led to a peculiar practice among some American units in the Pacific. Flamethrower operators would sometimes wear regular infantry gear over their specialized equipment to avoid being singled out by enemy snipers. In the Pacific, where Japanese forces often fought to the last man from heavily fortified positions, flamethrowers became an essential tool for American forces. The Battle of Peleliu in September 1944 saw extensive use of flamethrowers, with Marine Corps historian Bennis M. Frank noting, "The flamethrower was the most effective weapon we had against the Japanese in their fortified caves." On Peleliu, Marines faced an intricate network of caves and bunkers that conventional weapons struggled to overcome. Flamethrowers, however, could reach into these hidden defenses, either killing the defenders outright or forcing them into the open where they could be engaged by other weapons. As the war drew to a close, flamethrowers played a role in some of its final desperate battles. During the Soviet assault on Berlin in April 1945, Red Army troops used flamethrowers to clear German defenders from the ruins of the once grand capital. In one particularly fierce engagement, Soviet troops used flamethrowers to flush out fanatical Hitler Youth members defending the Reichstag building on April 30, 1945, the very day that Hitler died in his nearby bunker. In the Pacific, the Battle of Okinawa, lasting from April to June 1945, saw widespread use of flamethrowers by American forces as they overcame fanatical Japanese resistance. The fighting on Okinawa was some of the bloodiest of the war, with over 12,000 American and 110,000 Japanese lives lost. US forces employed over 600 portable flamethrowers and 40 tank-mounted units. The civilian toll was horrific, with many Okinawans trapped in caves alongside Japanese soldiers suffering the same fiery fate. The legacy of flamethrowers in World War II is a complex one. While their effectiveness as a tactical weapon is undeniable, the horrific nature of their effects led to increasing scrutiny in the post-war years. The 1980 Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons prohibited the use of incendiary weapons against civilian populations, though not their use against military targets. Steel dragons, the fiery breath of armored beasts. In the annals of warfare, few weapons have inspired as much awe and terror as the vehicle-mounted flamethrower. As the smoke cleared from the battlefields of World War I, military strategists began to envision a new kind of war machine, one that could combine the crushing power of armor with the primal fear induced by flames. This vision would ultimately materialize in the form of fearsome vehicles like the Churchill Crocodile, a British tank that would breathe fire across the battlefields of World War II. As the ancient Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu once said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." The psychological impact of these flame-throwing behemoths would prove this maxim true in the most terrifying way imaginable. The concept of mounting flamethrowers on vehicles was not entirely new. During World War I, the Germans had experimented with flame-projecting devices on their A7V tanks. The first recorded use of such a device was during the Battle of St. Quentin on March 21, 1918, where it proved to be more of a psychological weapon than an effective combat tool. However, it was in the interwar period that the idea truly began to take shape. In 1929, the Soviet Union introduced the KH-T-26, a flamethrower tank based on the T-26 light tank. This early attempt at combining armor and flame was a harbinger of things to come. The KH-T-26 saw action in the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, where it was used by Republican forces against the nationalists, providing valuable combat data for future developments. As tensions rose across Europe in the late 1930s, various nations accelerated their development of armored flamethrowers. The Germans, always at the forefront of military technology, created the Flampanzer series. The Flampanzer I, based on the Panzer I chassis, saw action during the invasion of France in 1940. Despite its limited success, it paved the way for future developments. One notable engagement occurred on May 17, 1940, near the town of Beaumont in Belgium, where a group of Flampanzer Wurst tanks successfully dislodged French troops from fortified positions, demonstrating the psychological impact of flame weapons. The Germans would continue to refine their designs, culminating in the formidable Flampanzer III, which saw extensive use on the Eastern Front against Soviet forces. But it was the British who would perfect the art of the vehicle-mounted flamethrower with the creation of the Churchill Crocodile. Developed under a veil of secrecy, the Crocodile was the brainchild of the Petroleum Warfare Department, a clandestine organization established in 1940 in response to the threat of German invasion. The department, headed by Donald Banks, was tasked with finding innovative ways to use petroleum in warfare. Banks, a civilian oil executive before the war, brought a unique perspective to military research. His team's early experiments included the infamous flame fougasse, an improvised explosive device that would spray burning petroleum over a wide area, intended to repel German landing craft. The Churchill Crocodile was a modification of the Churchill infantry tank, a sturdy and reliable workhorse of the British Army. What set the Crocodile apart was its devastating weapon system, a flamethrower capable of projecting a jet of flaming fuel up to 120 yards. The fuel was stored in an armored trailer towed behind the tank, containing 400 imperial gallons of fuel and 5 cylinders of compressed nitrogen to propel it. The flamethrower could fire for up to 81-second bursts, creating a terrifying spectacle on the battlefield. The development process was not without its challenges. Early prototypes suffered from fuel leaks and ignition problems. One infamous incident occurred during a demonstration in 1942, when a prototype crocodile accidentally set fire to a nearby field, nearly incinerating a group of observing officers. Major General Percy Hobart, commander of the 79th Armored Division, recognized the potential of the crocodile. His division, nicknamed Hobart's Funnies, specialized in developing and operating specialized armored fighting vehicles. Under his guidance, the crocodile was refined and prepared for its baptism of fire on the beaches of Normandy. Hobart, a maverick in military circles, had been forced into retirement in 1940 due to his unconventional ideas, only to be recalled by Winston Churchill himself, who recognized the need for innovative thinking in modern warfare. Churchill famously quipped, "Thank God we have a man like Hobart. He's a genius." On June 6, 1944, as Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, the Churchill crocodiles were among the specialized vehicles that would prove crucial in breaching the formidable German defenses. The sight of these armored behemoths spewing streams of liquid fire was enough to break the morale of even the most hardened German defenders. In one notable incident on June 8th, near the village of Crepin, a single crocodile tank managed to secure the surrender of an entire German company entrenched in a fortified farmhouse. The German commander later stated, "We were prepared to fight tanks, but not dragons." One British tank commander, Captain David Render of the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, later recalled the terrifying effect of the crocodile. "The effect was devastating. The Germans came out with their hands up. Nobody wants to be burned alive." Render, who commanded crocodiles in several engagements, noted that the mere presence of the flame tanks often led to immediate enemy surrender. In his memoirs, he recounted an incident near Caen, where a group of SS troops, known for their fanatical resistance, threw down their weapons at the first sight of the approaching crocodiles. The crocodiles played a pivotal role in Operation Astonia, the assault on Le Havre in September 1944. The German garrison, entrenched in deep concrete bunkers, had resisted conventional attacks. However, when faced with the crocodiles, many surrendered rather than face the horrifying prospect of being burned alive. Major General Roberts, commanding the 11th Armored Division, remarked, "The mere sight of the crocodiles was enough. The use of the weapon was devastatingly effective. The operation saw the use of 24 crocodiles, which systematically reduced German strongpoints, leading to the capture of over 11,000 German troops and the liberation of Le Havre with minimal Allied casualties. The psychological impact of the crocodile cannot be overstated. German prisoners of war often spoke of their terror at facing these fire-breathing tanks. One German soldier, captured after an encounter with crocodiles near Falaise in August 1944, was quoted as saying, "We heard rumors of these flame tanks, but we didn't believe it. When we saw them, it was like facing dragons. There was no hope." This sentiment was echoed by many captured German soldiers, who referred to the crocodiles as Teufel Panzer, devil tanks. The crocodile's effectiveness was not limited to its flame-projecting capabilities. The vehicle retained all the armament of a standard Churchill tank, including a 75 mm gun and a coaxial machine gun. This made it a versatile weapon system, capable of engaging a variety of targets. During the fierce fighting in the Reichswald forest in February 1945, crocodiles proved invaluable in clearing German positions among the dense trees. In one particularly intense engagement on February 9th, a group of 3 crocodiles from the 141st Regiment Royal Armoured Corps cleared a series of heavily fortified German bunkers that had resisted repeated infantry assaults, demonstrating the weapon's effectiveness in close-quarters combat. Despite its fearsome reputation, the crocodile was not without its drawbacks. The towed trailer made the tank less maneuverable and more vulnerable to anti-tank fire. There was also the constant danger of the fuel trailer being hit and exploding. One crocodile commander, Lieutenant John Hansard of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment, narrowly escaped death when his tank's trailer was hit by a German Panzerfaust near Goch in February 1945. The resulting explosion destroyed the trailer, but, miraculously, left the tank and its crew unharmed. Hansard later wrote, "It was like riding a powder keg. We knew every mission could be our last." By the end of the war, approximately 800 Churchill crocodiles had been produced. They saw action not only in northwest Europe, but also in Italy, where they proved effective in dislodging German forces from fortified positions in the Gothic Line. During Operation Vampire in April 1945, crocodiles of the North Irish Horse Regiment played a crucial role in breaking through German defences along the Senio River, clearing a path for the 8th Indian Division's advance. Inferno in the jungle, the scorching legacy of Vietnam's flamethrowers. The dense, verdant jungles of Vietnam, with their oppressive heat and shadowy recesses, became the unlikely stage for one of the most controversial weapons of modern warfare. As American forces waded deeper into the quagmire of the Vietnam War, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to melt into the landscape, utilizing vast networks of underground tunnels to strike and vanish like ghosts. In response, the US military turned to a weapon that could flush out the hidden foe and turn their subterranean sanctuaries into infernos. General William Westmoreland, commander of US forces in Vietnam from 1964 to 1968, once remarked, "The enemy's guerrilla tactics forced us to innovate. In this war, the jungle itself was the enemy, and we had to find ways to deny its sanctuary." The use of flamethrowers in Vietnam was not without precedent. These weapons had proven their brutal effectiveness in World War II and the Korean War. However, the unique challenges of the Vietnam conflict, the guerrilla tactics, the impenetrable jungle, and the labyrinthine tunnel systems gave new purpose to these instruments of fire and fear. The M97 flamethrower, weighing 65 pounds when fully loaded, became a common sight in infantry units. Capable of projecting flame up to 65 meters, it was a formidable weapon in the close quarters of jungle warfare. Private First Class Michael Kelly of the 1st Infantry Division recalled his first encounter with the weapon during a training exercise at Fort Riley in 1966. "When I saw that wall of flame, I understood why they called it Zippo. It was like holding the power of hell in your hands." One of the most infamous applications of flamethrowers in Vietnam was in the clearing of the Cu Chi tunnels, a vast network of underground passages stretching for over 120 miles northwest of Saigon. Discovered in 1965 by units of the US 25th Infantry Division, these tunnels became a thorn in the side of American forces, serving as hiding spots, supply routes, and staging areas for Viet Cong attacks. Traditional methods of clearing these tunnels proved ineffective and incredibly dangerous for the soldiers tasked with entering them. The tunnels were so extensive that in 1967, US forces launched Operation Cedar Falls, a massive effort to destroy the Cu Chi network. Despite dropping over 30,000 pounds of bombs and using bulldozers to strip away the jungle cover, the tunnels remained largely intact, demonstrating the need for more direct methods of clearance. Enter the flamethrower. US troops, particularly those in specialized tunnel rat units, began using portable flamethrowers to clear these underground labyrinths. The M2 flamethrower, capable of projecting burning fuel up to 65 feet, became a common sight in these operations. Sergeant James Schreiner, a tunnel rat who operated in Cu Chi in 1966, recalled the terrifying effectiveness of the weapon. The flame would go in, sucking out all the oxygen. Anyone inside didn't stand a chance. It was quick, but it was hell. Schreiner's unit, part of the 25th Infantry Division, was responsible for clearing over 30 miles of tunnels during their deployment. In one particularly harrowing incident on March 18, 1966, Schreiner and his team encountered a group of Viet Cong soldiers in a large chamber. The ensuing firefight ended only when Schreiner deployed his flamethrower, engulfing the entire chamber in flames. The screams, I'll never forget those screams, he later wrote in his memoir, Tunnel Warrior, The Tunnel Rats of Vietnam. The psychological impact of flamethrowers was profound on both sides of the conflict. For American troops, the weapon provided a sense of security in the face of an often invisible enemy. Private First Class John Smith, who served with the 25th Infantry Division in 1967, described the reassurance the weapon brought. Knowing we had that firepower, it made the jungle feel a little less threatening, but using it, that was something else entirely. Smith's unit was involved in Operation Junction City, the largest U.S. airborne operation since World War II. During this operation, flamethrowers were used extensively to clear landing zones and destroy enemy bunkers. On February 28, 1967, Smith witnessed a flamethrower attack on a Viet Cong stronghold near Tay 9. The entire tree line just erupted in flames, he recalled. It was like something out of Dante's Inferno. For the Viet Cong, the threat of flamethrowers added a new dimension of terror to their already perilous existence. Nguyen Van Ly, a former Viet Cong soldier who survived a flamethrower attack in the Cu Chi tunnels, later recounted, "We feared many things, the bombs, the gas, but the fire, it was like facing the anger of the gods. It changed how we moved, how we fought." Lai was part of a unit stationed in the Cu Chi tunnels during the Tet Offensive in 1968. On February 3rd, his unit's position was attacked by American forces using flamethrowers. "The heat was unbearable," he said. "We could feel it even deep in the tunnels. Many of my comrades chose to surrender rather than face the flames." The deployment of flamethrowers wasn't limited to infantry units. The US military also utilized vehicle-mounted flamethrowers, most notably the M132 armored flamethrower, affectionately nicknamed the Zippo. Based on the M113 armored personnel carrier, the M132 could project a stream of flaming fuel up to 200 meters. These mobile inferno machines were particularly effective in clearing large areas of dense vegetation, denying the Viet Cong their jungle cover. The 5th Mechanized Infantry Division, deployed to Vietnam in 1968, made extensive use of the M132 in clearing operations along the demilitarized zone. Captain Robert Ellison, who commanded a company of M132s, described their effectiveness. "We could clear a football field-sized area in minutes. It was like mowing the lawn, if the lawn was full of booby traps and enemy soldiers." In Operation Piranha, launched on September 7, 1965, in Quang Ngai Province, M132s were used to devastating effect. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Dorsey III, who commanded the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines during the operation, noted in his after-action report, "The psychological impact of the flamethrowers cannot be overstated. We saw enemy combatants abandoning well-fortified positions at the mere sound of the M132s approaching." The operation, which lasted until September 10th, resulted in 178 confirmed Viet Cong casualties, with many attributed to the use of flamethrowers. Dorsey's report also highlighted an unexpected benefit of the weapon. The intense heat generated by the flamethrowers often detonated hidden explosive devices, clearing our path of booby traps. However, the use of flamethrowers was not without controversy, even among American forces. The weapon's gruesome effects and the suffering it inflicted led many soldiers to question its morality. Corporal David Anderson, who operated an M2 flamethrower with the 1st Cavalry Division in 1968, expressed his conflicted feelings. "It was effective, no doubt about that, but the screams, they stay with you. You start to wonder if winning is worth that kind of cost." Anderson's unit participated in the Battle of Khe San, where flamethrowers were used to clear North Vietnamese army bunkers during the siege. On April 1, 1968, Anderson was ordered to clear a series of enemy positions. "I remember the date because it felt like some sick April Fool's joke," he said. "I burned out 3 bunkers that day. The smell, it's not something you forget." The ethical concerns surrounding flamethrowers extended beyond the battlefield. As images and accounts of their use filtered back to the United States, They became a focal point for anti-war protesters. The stark brutality of death by fire seemed to encapsulate the perceived inhumanity of the entire conflict. Renowned journalist David Halberstam, in his book The Making of a Quagmire, wrote, "The flamethrower became a symbol of everything wrong with this war. It was a weapon that didn't just kill, it obliterated, it dehumanized." This sentiment was echoed in protests across America, with signs reading, "Stop the burning," becoming a common sight at anti-war rallies. Despite these concerns, the military continued to employ flamethrowers throughout much of the war. Their use peaked in 1968, during the aftermath of the Tet Offensive, as American forces sought to root out Viet Cong forces from urban areas and clear tunnel complexes. In the Battle of Hue alone, which lasted from January 31st to March 2nd, 1968, over 250 flamethrower attacks were recorded in a single month. Marine Sergeant John Canley, who would later receive the Medal of Honor for his actions in Hue, described the urban combat. "The city was a maze, and every building could hide the enemy. Flamethrowers were often the only way to be sure a position was clear." On February 6th, Canley's unit used flamethrowers to clear a series of fortified buildings near the Perfume River, an action that helped secure a crucial foothold in the city. The effectiveness of flamethrowers in combat led to adaptations in Viet Cong tactics. Tunnel systems began to incorporate fire-resistant chambers and multiple emergency exits. Le Duong, a Viet Cong sapper who worked on expanding the Chu Chi tunnels in 1967, described these modifications. "We dug deeper, added more turns. We couldn't stop the fire, but we could try to escape it." Duong and his team implemented a system of watertight doors and ventilation shafts designed to contain fires and preserve oxygen in sealed chambers. "We also started storing our supplies in metal containers," he added. "It wouldn't save them from a direct hit, but it gave us a chance if the fire was at the tunnel entrance." As the war progressed and American forces began to withdraw, the use of flamethrowers gradually declined. The last recorded combat use of a flamethrower in Vietnam was on May 15, 1970, during a clearing operation in the Iron Triangle, a Viet Cong stronghold northwest of Saigon. Specialist 4th Class Timothy Burns of the 25th Infantry Division was the last recorded American soldier to use a flamethrower in combat. In his after-action report, Burns wrote, "It felt like closing a chapter of the war, but not one I'm proud of." As we close this chapter of history, the echoes of flamethrowers still sear our collective memory. From the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima to the frozen ruins of Stalingrad, these weapons of liquid fire wrote a dark narrative in the annals of warfare. Men like Corporal Herschel Williams and Sergeant Yakov Pavlov wielded this terrible power, forever changed by its devastating effects. As we reflect on this grim chapter, we're reminded of the words of Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who quoted the Bhagavad Gita after witnessing the first nuclear test. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." While Oppenheimer spoke of nuclear fire, his words resonate just as powerfully with the more intimate inferno of the flamethrower. In the end, the story of the flamethrower in World War II serves as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both ingenious creation and terrible destruction. It challenges us to consider the true cost of victory and the moral complexities of warfare. As we bid farewell to this fiery tale, let us carry forward the lessons learned, ever vigilant against the flames of conflict that continue to threaten our world today.